Hello, my name is Victoria Sterling. The women at Maplewood Country Club laughed when I arrived in my 15-year-old Honda Civic, whispering about the scholarship girl who clearly didn't belong among their Mercedes and BMWs. What they didn't know was that I owned the land their precious country club sat on, along with every commercial building in a 12-block radius worth over $200 million. The question is, when everyone around you judges success by appearances, how do you stay true to your values while building an empire they cannot see? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. That morning began like countless others during the past 8 months since I had reluctantly accepted membership at Maplewood Country Club. The acceptance had come through my late grandmother's estate, a woman whose wisdom about wealth and discretion had shaped every decision I made about money and social status. As I drove through the wrought iron gates that separated the club's manicured grounds from the bustling commercial district beyond, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and saw exactly what the other members saw. A 32-year-old woman in a simple navy dress, driving a car that had seen better decades, arriving at an institution that measured worth in luxury brands and inherited pedigree. The Honda's engine made a sound that suggested mechanical attention would be required soon, but I had deliberately chosen to keep this vehicle despite having the resources to purchase something more impressive. My grandmother had taught me that true wealth whispered while poverty screamed, and that the most dangerous mistake wealthy people could make was allowing their possessions to announce their financial status to those who might exploit or manipulate them accordingly. Maplewood Country Club represented the pinnacle of social status in our city, established in 1923 by industrialist families whose fortunes had been built on steel, oil, and railroad investments. The Georgian colonial clubhouse commanded a hilltop position overlooking the 18th hole, its red brick facade and white columns projecting the kind of understated elegance that money could buy but breeding was supposed to refine. Members paid initiation fees that exceeded the median household income and monthly dues that could finance a luxury vacation, all for the privilege of dining, golfing, and socializing with others who shared their elevated economic circumstances. I parked between a gleaming Porsche Cayenne and a Mercedes S-Class, both vehicles worth more than many people earned in several years. The contrast was deliberate on my part, though I doubted anyone understood the careful thought that went into maintaining my unremarkable exterior presence. My financial advisor had suggested purchasing something more appropriate to my actual net worth, but I preferred the freedom that came with being underestimated rather than the scrutiny that accompanied obvious wealth. The club's interior reflected the same commitment to traditional luxury that characterized its membership policies. Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors, while oil paintings of fox hunting scenes and pastoral landscapes lined the walls between mahogany panels that gleamed with decades of careful maintenance. Crystal chandeliers provided lighting that was both functional and ceremonial, casting a warm glow over leather furniture that had been selected for comfort and status in equal measure. But beneath the surface elegance, I observed the subtle hierarchies and social dynamics that determined who belonged and who remained forever on the periphery. Conversations shifted when certain members approached, deference was shown through body language and seating arrangements, and invitations to private events were extended or withheld based on calculations that had nothing to do with character or personal accomplishment. My own position in this ecosystem remained deliberately ambiguous. I had been admitted through my grandmother's legacy membership, a provision that allowed family members to inherit access without undergoing the traditional sponsorship and evaluation process. This had created confusion about my background and financial status, since I had appeared without the usual social connections that established new members, credibility, and place in the hierarchy. The assumptions made about my circumstances were both predictable and useful. My modest clothing, unremarkable vehicle, and tendency to decline expensive social events had led to a consensus that I was struggling financially while attempting to maintain appearances through my inherited membership. The term scholarship girl had emerged to describe my situation, suggesting someone who belonged academically or professionally, but lacked the economic foundation that characterized true membership in their social class. I had done nothing to correct these assumptions because they served my larger purposes perfectly. While other members competed to display their wealth through increasingly elaborate possessions and experiences, I was able to observe their behavior, understand their motivations, and build relationships based on genuine compatibility rather than mutual financial calculation. My real story began 25 years earlier in the modest apartment where my grandmother had raised me after my parents died in an automobile accident. Eleanor Sterling had worked as a seamstress and cleaner for wealthy families throughout the city, but she possessed an understanding of money and investment that would have impressed the most sophisticated financial professionals. Every dollar she earned was carefully allocated between immediate needs and long-term wealth building, with particular attention to real estate investments that others overlooked or undervalued. Victoria, she would tell me during our weekend walks through the commercial district, rich people buy things that make them look wealthy. Wealthy people buy things that make them more money. The difference between looking rich and being rich is the difference between temporary comfort and permanent security. She had begun her real estate portfolio by purchasing a small retail building that had been abandoned during an economic downturn. The previous owner needed immediate cash and was willing to accept significantly below market value in exchange for a quick sale. My grandmother had saved for 3 years to make the down payment, then spent evenings and weekends renovating the property herself to reduce costs and increase its rental potential. The first rental income from that building had provided the foundation for purchasing a second property, then a third, each acquisition carefully selected for its potential to generate positive cash flow while appreciating in value over time. She had developed relationships with contractors, property managers, and commercial tenants that allowed her to identify opportunities before they reached the broader market, often purchasing buildings at substantial discounts from owners who needed quick sales or were unaware of their property's true potential. By the time I graduated from high school, my grandmother's portfolio included 17 commercial properties throughout the city, generating monthly rental income that exceeded what most professionals earned annually. But she had maintained the same modest lifestyle throughout her wealth accumulation, driving the same vehicle for 15 years, shopping at discount stores, and living in the same small apartment where she had raised me. "The moment you start spending money to impress other people," she had explained, "you stop building wealth and start destroying it. Every dollar you waste on appearances is a dollar that cannot work to secure your future." This philosophy had guided every financial decision I made throughout college and graduate school, where I studied business administration with a focus on real estate development and investment. While classmates accumulated student debt and credit card balances, I worked part-time managing my grandmother's properties, learning the practical aspects of real estate ownership while contributing to the portfolio's continued growth. When my grandmother passed away during my final semester, she had left me an estate worth over $150 million, consisting primarily of commercial real estate throughout the city's most valuable districts. The portfolio included office buildings, retail centers, warehouse facilities, and mixed-use developments, all generating substantial monthly income while continuing to appreciate in value due to their strategic locations and careful maintenance. But along with this extraordinary inheritance came explicit instructions about how to manage both the wealth and the social challenges it would create. My grandmother's will had included a letter explaining her concerns about the corrupting influence of obvious wealth and her hope that I would continue building the portfolio while maintaining the discretion and values that had enabled its creation. "Wealth brings freedom," she had written, "but it also brings responsibility and danger. Freedom to pursue your goals without financial constraint, responsibility to use resources wisely and productively, and danger from those who will try to manipulate or exploit you once they understand what you possess. Your greatest protection will always be their underestimation of your capabilities and resources." Quote, this guidance had shaped my approach to managing the inheritance and expanding the portfolio over the 8 years since her death. I had continued acquiring properties, now owning 43 commercial buildings throughout the metropolitan area, while maintaining the same modest lifestyle that allowed me to move through the world without attracting the attention or assumptions that accompanied obvious wealth. The country club membership had been one of the few visible inheritances from my grandmother's estate, though I had initially resisted activating it. The social environment seemed to contradict everything she had taught me about discretion and the dangers of association with people who measured worth through material display. But eventually I had recognized the strategic value of understanding how wealthy people thought and behaved, information that could prove useful for my real estate investments and business development activities. My first months at Maplewood had confirmed both the benefits and the challenges of this environment. I had gained insights into market trends, investment opportunities, and business connections that would have been difficult to access elsewhere. But I had also witnessed the casual cruelty and social manipulation that characterized relationships based primarily on economic competition rather than genuine compatibility or shared values. The women who had labeled me the scholarship girl represented the most problematic aspects of this social ecosystem. They had inherited their wealth rather than creating it, and they used their economic advantages to maintain hierarchies that protected their status while excluding others who might challenge their assumptions about superiority and entitlement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Patricia Whitmore served as the unofficial leader of this group, a woman whose family had built their fortune in manufacturing during the previous century and who now devoted her time to maintaining their social position through strategic charity work and carefully orchestrated social events. She possessed the kind of casual arrogance that came from never having her financial security questioned, and she treated people with fewer obvious resources as amusing curiosities rather than equals deserving respect. Her closest associate, Margaret Thornfield, had married into wealth rather than inheriting it, which made her particularly aggressive about establishing her credibility through displays of luxury and social connections. She drove the newest vehicle, wore the most expensive clothing, and spoke constantly about exclusive vacations and private events that reinforced her membership in the economic elite while reminding others of their inferior status. The third member of their inner circle, Catherine Pembroke, represented old money in its most refined form, with family connections that traced back to the club's founding members and a trust fund that generated more monthly income than most people earned annually. She possessed the quiet confidence that came from never having to prove her worth, but she used this advantage to make subtle comments that undermined others' confidence while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. These three women had established themselves as the arbiters of social acceptability within the club, determining who received invitations to exclusive events, who was included in influential conversations, and who remained permanently relegated to the periphery of their social ecosystem. Their judgment carried weight because other members recognized their financial resources and social connections, creating a system where wealth translated directly into social authority. My presence had disrupted their comfortable assumptions about hierarchy and belonging. I clearly belonged to the club through my grandmother's legacy membership, but I did not display the markers of wealth and status that they used to determine someone's appropriate place in their social order. This ambiguity had created uncertainty about how to categorize me, leading to increasingly direct attempts to establish my actual financial circumstances and social background. Their investigative efforts had yielded limited information, since I had carefully maintained privacy about my personal finances while providing just enough biographical details to satisfy basic social expectations. They knew I had inherited my membership, that I lived modestly, and that I declined invitations to expensive social events, but they had not discovered the real estate portfolio or the trust funds that generated my actual income. This information gap had led to the scholarship girl designation, a term that suggested I was maintaining appearances despite limited resources, perhaps hoping to attract a wealthy husband or business opportunities that could improve my circumstances. The label carried both condescension and pity, implying that I was struggling to belong in an environment where I could not afford the membership costs without assistance. Their assumption was understandable given the evidence they could observe, but it revealed their fundamental inability to imagine wealth that did not announce itself through obvious displays of luxury and consumption. They had never encountered someone who possessed significant resources while choosing to live modestly, because their own experience of wealth was entirely defined by its visible expression through possessions, experiences, and social positioning. This morning would mark the beginning of a transformation in our relationship, though I did not yet understand how dramatically the dynamics would shift. I had accepted an invitation to join their weekly tennis round, not because I particularly enjoyed their company, but because I had learned that their conversations often revealed useful information about business opportunities, market trends, and political developments that could affect my investment decisions. As I walked toward the tennis courts carrying the same modest equipment bag I had used since college, I caught fragments of their conversation that suggested today would involve more direct questioning about my background and circumstances. Patricia's voice carried clearly across the manicured lawn, as she discussed someone's inappropriate attempt to join their exclusive charity committee without possessing adequate financial credentials. Some people simply do not understand that good intentions cannot substitute for proper resources, she was saying to Margaret, who nodded enthusiastically while adjusting the strings on a racket that had cost more than many people's monthly rent. I realized with growing certainty that this conversation was intended for my benefit, designed to communicate their expectations about social hierarchy and the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries between economic classes. They were preparing to test my understanding of my place in their world, and their reaction to my responses would determine whether I remained an amusing curiosity or became a target for more aggressive social exclusion. What they could not possibly have anticipated was that this conversation would become the catalyst for revelations that would fundamentally alter every assumption they had made about wealth, power, and the nature of true financial security. Their comfort in judging others based on appearances was about to encounter a reality that would challenge everything they believed about success and social status. As I approached the courts where they waited with expressions of barely concealed anticipation, I carried with me the knowledge that could transform their understanding of the world in ways they were utterly unprepared to process. But for now, I would continue playing the role they had assigned me, allowing their assumptions to create the conditions for a revelation that would change everything. The tennis courts at Maplewood Country Club occupied a pristine section of the property where morning sunlight filtered through carefully maintained oak trees, creating patterns of light and shadow across the clay surfaces. As I approached the designated court, my tennis bag slung over my shoulder, I observed the three women who had become the unofficial arbiters of social acceptability within this exclusive environment. Their positioning around the court suggested a carefully orchestrated gathering, rather than a casual sporting event. Patricia Whitmore stood near the net, her platinum tennis bracelet catching the morning light as she adjusted her grip on a racket that represented the pinnacle of modern engineering and cost more than many families spent on groceries in several months. Her tennis attire had been selected from the most exclusive athletic wear collections, designed to communicate both serious athleticism and substantial disposable income. Every detail of her appearance conveyed the message that excellence required significant financial investment. Margaret Thornfield occupied the baseline, practicing serves with the mechanical precision of someone who had received extensive professional instruction. Her movements demonstrated the kind of technical competence that came from years of private coaching, exclusive training facilities, and unlimited access to the finest equipment available. She approached tennis with the same aggressive determination that characterized her approach to social climbing, viewing each match as an opportunity to demonstrate superiority through superior preparation and resources. Catherine Pembroke sat in the shade of the pavilion, her posture reflecting the casual confidence that accompanied inherited wealth and social position. Unlike her companions, she did not need to prove her athletic abilities or demonstrate her commitment to excellence through obvious displays of preparation. Her presence alone was sufficient to establish her authority within their group dynamic, and she observed the proceedings with the detached interest of someone who had never questioned her right to judge others. The court itself represented a significant investment in both construction and maintenance, with a surface that was meticulously groomed daily and drainage systems that ensured optimal playing conditions regardless of weather. The surrounding infrastructure included climate-controlled storage facilities for equipment, a fully equipped pro shop staffed by internationally certified instructors, and viewing areas designed for comfortable observation of matches and social interaction among members. This environment served multiple purposes beyond athletic competition. The tennis courts functioned as a social arena, where business relationships were cultivated, personal connections were established, and hierarchies were reinforced through both athletic performance and the subtle communication of economic status. Members used these gatherings to exchange information about investment opportunities, evaluate potential business partners, and maintain the networks that sustained their professional and social influence. My own relationship to this environment remained deliberately ambiguous. I participated in tennis activities not because I sought their approval or desired integration into their social hierarchy, but because these gatherings provided invaluable insights into the thinking and behavior patterns of wealthy individuals. Understanding how they processed information, made decisions, and evaluated opportunities had proven essential for my own business development and investment strategies. The tennis skills I demonstrated had been developed through years of playing at public courts and community centers, where equipment was shared and instruction was minimal. This background had created a playing style that emphasized strategy and mental toughness over technique and powerful equipment. I had learned to maximize limited resources while competing against opponents who possessed every possible advantage, developing adaptability and resilience that proved valuable both on the court and in business contexts. My choice to continue using equipment purchased during my college years served multiple strategic purposes. The modest appearance of my racket and tennis attire reinforced the assumptions about my financial circumstances while allowing me to observe how others responded to perceived economic disparity. More importantly, it demonstrated that performance could transcend equipment limitations when combined with proper preparation and mental focus. The real preparation that enabled my success occurred away from the club entirely, in the early morning hours when I reviewed financial reports, analyzed market trends, and made investment decisions that would affect my portfolio's performance for months or years ahead. While other members of Maplewood Country Club spent their mornings coordinating social schedules and planning luxury purchases, I was engaged in the systematic work of wealth building that my grandmother had taught me represented the true foundation of financial security. My typical morning routine began at 5 o'clock, when global markets were active and real estate opportunities required immediate evaluation and response. I maintained offices in 3 different buildings that I owned, allowing me to conduct business while personally inspecting my properties and maintaining relationships with tenants, contractors, and property managers. This hands-on approach to real estate investment had proven essential for identifying problems before they became expensive, recognizing opportunities for improvement and expansion, and building the trust relationships that generated referrals and insider information about potential acquisitions. The property management software I had developed tracked every aspect of my real estate portfolio's performance, from rental income and maintenance costs to market value assessments and tax optimization strategies. This system allowed me to monitor 43 different properties while identifying patterns and trends that informed future investment decisions. Most real estate investors relied on professional management companies that charged substantial fees while providing limited personal attention to individual properties, but I had learned that direct involvement generated both higher returns and deeper understanding of market dynamics. The financial discipline that sustained this operation had been developed through years of careful budgeting and strategic decision-making under my grandmother's guidance. Every expenditure was evaluated according to its potential to generate future income or reduce ongoing costs, with particular attention to the difference between necessary investments and luxury purchases that provided temporary satisfaction but no lasting value. This analytical approach had become automatic, allowing me to evaluate opportunities and risks with the kind of systematic thinking that most people applied only to major decisions. The contrast between my actual morning routine and the assumptions made by other club members created opportunities for both learning and strategic advantage. While they presumed I was struggling to maintain appearances on a limited budget, I was actually managing a business operation that generated more monthly income than most of them possessed in liquid assets. Their underestimation of my capabilities and resources provided perfect cover for continued wealth accumulation without the social complications that accompanied obvious financial success. The tennis matches themselves served as laboratories for observing decision-making patterns and behavioral responses under competitive pressure. Patricia Whitmore's approach to the game revealed the same aggressive entitlement that characterized her social interactions, with a tendency to challenge line calls when matches became close, and to attribute losses to equipment problems or court conditions rather than opponent's skill. Her comfort with bending rules when convenient provided useful insights into how she likely approached business and financial decisions. Margaret Thornfield's playing style demonstrated the insecurity that drove her social climbing, with excessive preparation that suggested fear of failure and a need to prove worthiness through superior performance. She invested heavily in coaching and equipment, while lacking the natural athleticism or competitive instincts that would have made those investments truly effective. Her approach to tennis mirrored her approach to wealth, emphasizing appearance and preparation over results and substance. Catherine Pembroke played tennis with the same casual confidence that characterized all her activities, demonstrating competence without particular effort or concern about outcomes. Her inherited security allowed her to treat competition as entertainment rather than evaluation, which made her both more enjoyable to play with and more dangerous to underestimate. Her tennis game reflected the kind of unself-conscious excellence that came from never having to prove worthiness or justify position. These behavioral observations provided valuable intelligence for my real estate business, where understanding personality types and motivational patterns often determined the success or failure of complex negotiations. Property owners, potential tenants, contractors, and financial partners all exhibited the same kinds of behavioral patterns under pressure that they displayed during competitive tennis matches. Learning to read these signals had improved my ability to structure deals, anticipate problems, and build productive long-term relationships. The conversations that occurred during tennis breaks revealed even more useful information about market conditions, regulatory changes, and investment opportunities. Wealthy individuals often discussed confidential business matters with casual indiscretion, when they assumed their audience lacked the sophistication to understand or exploit the information being shared. Their comfort with speaking freely around me had provided advance notice of zoning changes, development projects, and economic trends that affected property values throughout the metropolitan area. This intelligence advantage had enabled several particularly profitable investments over the past year. When Patricia mentioned her husband's bank's plans to relocate their regional headquarters, I had been able to purchase commercial properties in the target area before prices reflected the increased demand that would result from hundreds of new employees. When Margaret discussed her family's manufacturing company's expansion plans, I had identified warehouse properties that would benefit from increased industrial activity in specific neighborhoods. The irony was profound. While these women viewed me as someone who did not belong in their social circle due to insufficient financial resources, I was actually using their own conversations to generate investment returns that exceeded their families' annual incomes. Their assumption that I could not understand or act upon sophisticated financial information created opportunities for systematic profit that they were inadvertently providing through their casual indiscretion. The physical demands of tennis also served important purposes in my overall preparation strategy. The mental focus required for competitive play developed concentration skills that proved valuable during complex business negotiations and financial analysis. The physical conditioning maintained energy levels that allowed me to work longer hours while making better decisions under pressure. The competitive experience provided practice in maintaining composure during challenging situations, while reading opponents and adapting strategy based on their behavioral patterns. My grandmother had understood these connections between athletic competition and business success, encouraging my participation in sports during high school and college as preparation for the more serious competitions I would face as a real estate investor and business owner. She had recognized that tennis in particular required the kind of strategic thinking, psychological resilience, and adaptive planning that characterize successful entrepreneurs and investors. The equipment limitations I had chosen to maintain also served as valuable training for business contexts, where resources would be constrained and creativity would be required to achieve objectives. Learning to compete effectively against opponents with superior equipment had developed problem-solving skills and mental toughness that proved essential when negotiating with larger, better-funded competitors for prime real estate opportunities. The social aspects of tennis provided practice in maintaining relationships with people whose values and priorities differed significantly from my own. The ability to interact pleasantly with Patricia, Margaret, and Catherine, while privately disagreeing with their attitudes and behaviors, had proven essential for business contexts where personal compatibility was less important than professional effectiveness. Many successful real estate transactions required working with people whose character or ethics were questionable, but whose cooperation was necessary to achieve mutually beneficial outcomes. The weekly tennis routine had also established my presence at the club during peak social hours, creating opportunities to observe and learn from interactions that would have been difficult to access otherwise. The casual conversations that occurred in the locker rooms, dining areas, and social spaces provided insights into the real motivations and concerns that drove decision-making among wealthy individuals, information that was often more valuable than the formal presentations and public statements that characterized their official communications. The most valuable aspect of this routine was the development of patience and long-term thinking that allowed me to maintain my strategic position, despite the temptation to correct their assumptions or defend myself against their subtle condescension. My grandmother had taught me that premature revelation of capabilities or resources typically resulted in lost opportunities and unnecessary complications, while strategic patience often created conditions for maximum advantage when the time for action finally arrived. As I prepared for this particular tennis session, I carried with me the knowledge that represented months of careful observation and strategic preparation. The women who viewed me as an amusing curiosity or potential charity case had no understanding of the systematic intelligence gathering that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. Their comfort in my presence had created opportunities for learning that would prove invaluable when circumstances eventually forced a more direct confrontation. The morning's activities would provide another opportunity to observe their behavior while gathering information that could affect my business decisions for months ahead. But more importantly, I sensed that their increasing boldness in questioning my background and circumstances suggested that this period of strategic patience was approaching its conclusion. The time was coming when their assumptions would collide with reality in ways that would transform every aspect of our relationship and their understanding of the world they thought they controlled. The morning sun had reached its optimal angle for tennis by the time we completed our warm-up routine, and the court conditions reflected the meticulous maintenance standards that characterized every aspect of Maplewood Country Club. Patricia Whitmore had established herself as the unofficial organizer of our foursome, directing the selection of court position and match format with the same authoritative confidence that she applied to social situations throughout the club. Her assumption of leadership reflected both her personality and her understanding that economic status translated directly into social authority within this environment. The first set proceeded according to the predictable patterns that had developed over the previous months of our weekly matches. Patricia and Catherine formed one partnership, leveraging Patricia's aggressive baseline game and Catherine's intuitive court positioning to maintain consistent pressure against Margaret and myself. Their coordination reflected years of playing together at exclusive tournaments and private clubs, where partnership dynamics had been refined through expensive coaching and unlimited practice time. Margaret and I represented a more unconventional pairing, combining her technically proficient but strategically limited approach with my adaptive style that emphasized court coverage and tactical thinking over powerful equipment or perfect technique. The contrast in our preparation and resources was evident in every exchange, but our results consistently exceeded what appearance alone would suggest possible. The conversation during changeovers revealed the increasing directness with which Patricia and her associates were approaching their investigation of my background and circumstances. The previous month's subtle inquiries about my residential address and employment history had evolved into more pointed questions about my family's financial history and my plans for generating sufficient income to maintain club membership and social obligations. "Victoria, dear," Patricia began during the break between the first and second sets, her tone carrying the practiced sweetness that she used when preparing to deliver particularly cutting observations. "We were discussing the upcoming charity auction, and I realized we know so little about your professional background. What exactly is your field of expertise?" Quote. The question carried multiple layers of implication that were not lost on any of the participants in our conversation. Patricia was establishing the framework for a more comprehensive evaluation of my credentials and suitability for inclusion in their social circle, while simultaneously creating an opportunity for public judgment about my worthiness to participate in exclusive club activities that required substantial financial contributions. "I work in real estate," I replied simply, using the truthful but deliberately vague description that had served me well during previous inquiries. The answer provided enough information to satisfy basic social requirements, while avoiding the specific details that would have complicated their assumptions about my circumstances and capabilities. Margaret leaned forward with obvious interest, her competitive instincts recognizing an opportunity to establish superiority through more impressive professional credentials. "How fascinating. Are you an agent or do you work for one of the larger firms? The real estate market has been so challenging lately for people just starting their careers." Her phrasing contained the assumption that my involvement in real estate represented entry-level employment rather than business ownership or investment activity. This presumption reflected both her limited understanding of the industry and her need to maintain hierarchical distinctions that preserved her sense of superior position within our social dynamic. "I focus primarily on commercial properties," I responded, maintaining the same neutral tone while providing additional information that could be interpreted multiple ways depending on the listener's assumptions and knowledge base. The statement was completely accurate while allowing them to draw whatever conclusions they preferred about my role and level of responsibility within the commercial real estate sector. Catherine's expression shifted slightly, suggesting that she possessed more sophisticated understanding of commercial real estate than her companions. Her family's wealth had been built partially through strategic property investments, giving her insights into the substantial financial resources and specialized knowledge required for success in commercial real estate markets. "Commercial real estate is quite complex," she observed carefully, her voice carrying a note of curiosity that had not been present during previous conversations about my background. "The financial requirements alone can be overwhelming. Most people start with residential properties before attempting to understand commercial markets." Her comment created an opening for more detailed discussion about my experience and qualifications, but it also represented a subtle challenge to explain how someone in my apparent circumstances could claim involvement in commercial real estate without possessing the obvious financial resources that such activity typically required. The moment had arrived when strategic vagueness would no longer suffice to deflect their increasingly direct inquiries. Patricia's expression indicated that she was prepared to escalate her investigation until she obtained satisfactory answers about my background, financial resources, and legitimacy as a member of their social circle. Her discomfort with ambiguity reflected the need for clear hierarchical positioning that allowed her to determine appropriate levels of respect and inclusion. "Actually," I began, recognizing that the time for careful deflection had passed, "I own several commercial buildings throughout the metropolitan area. My focus is on strategic acquisitions that provide consistent rental income while appreciating in value over the long term." The statement transformed the atmosphere around our tennis court as dramatically as if I had announced that I possessed supernatural abilities. Patricia's racket actually slipped from her hand, clattering against the court surface with a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence that followed my revelation. Margaret's mouth opened slightly, her expression shifting from condescending curiosity to genuine confusion about how to process information that contradicted everything she had assumed about my circumstances. Catherine's response proved the most revealing, as her sophisticated understanding of commercial real estate allowed her to immediately recognize the financial implications of what I had described. Owning multiple commercial properties required not only substantial capital for initial purchases, but also ongoing financial resources for maintenance, property management, and market fluctuations that could affect rental income and property values. "Several buildings?" Patricia repeated, her voice carrying a note of disbelief that bordered on accusation. "What type of commercial properties? Office buildings? Retail centers? And how exactly does someone in your situation acquire commercial real estate?" Her phrasing revealed both her skepticism about my claims and her assumption that my modest appearance and lifestyle indicated limited financial resources that would make commercial property ownership impossible. The cognitive dissonance created by the contradiction between her assumptions and my statements had triggered a defensive response that sought to restore her understanding of the world by challenging the credibility of information that did not fit her preconceptions. "Office buildings primarily," I replied calmly, recognizing that this conversation had moved beyond the possibility of strategic retreat back to comfortable ambiguity. "Some mixed-use developments with retail and residential components." The portfolio has grown substantially over the past several years as market conditions have created opportunities for strategic acquisitions. Margaret's expression had shifted from confusion to something approaching panic as she processed the implications of what I was describing. Her own family's wealth, while substantial by most standards, was built primarily on inherited securities and conservative investments that generated steady but modest returns. The prospect that someone she had dismissed as financially struggling might actually possess a more sophisticated and profitable investment strategy than her own family had achieved created profound discomfort with her understanding of social hierarchy and financial sophistication. "I find that rather difficult to believe," Patricia declared, her tone sharpening with the kind of aggressive skepticism that she typically reserved for people who challenged her authority or contradicted her judgments. Commercial real estate requires enormous capital investments. The down payments alone would exceed what most people earn in several years. And that's before considering the ongoing costs of property management, maintenance, and market risk. Her challenge was delivered with the confidence of someone who had never had her financial knowledge questioned, but it also revealed the limitations of her understanding about real estate investment strategies and alternative financing methods. Her assumption that commercial property ownership required enormous personal capital reflected the conventional approach that wealthy families typically used, but it ignored the creative financing, partnership structures, and strategic leverage that could enable property acquisition with more modest initial investments. "You're absolutely correct about the capital requirements," I agreed, recognizing an opportunity to demonstrate knowledge that would further challenge their assumptions while maintaining factual accuracy. Traditional financing approaches do require substantial down payments and personal guarantees that put individual investors at significant risk. However, there are alternative structures that allow for property acquisition through partnerships, seller financing, and strategic use of existing equity. The technical discussion that followed revealed the extent to which my understanding of commercial real estate exceeded their own knowledge, despite their assumption that family wealth automatically translated into financial sophistication. Patricia's questions became increasingly specific, as she attempted to identify flaws in my explanations that would allow her to dismiss my claims and restore her comfortable assumptions about social hierarchy. But each answer I provided demonstrated deeper understanding of market dynamics, financing strategies, and investment analysis than she had expected from someone in my apparent circumstances. The conversation had evolved from a simple inquiry about professional background into an impromptu examination of commercial real estate expertise that was revealing uncomfortable truths about the relationship between appearance and substance. Catherine's growing silence during this exchange reflected her recognition that my knowledge base exceeded what could be explained by casual involvement or entry-level employment in real estate. Her family's own commercial property investments had provided her with sufficient background to evaluate the sophistication of my responses, and her expression indicated increasing concern about the implications of what she was hearing. The turning point came when Patricia, frustrated by her inability to identify obvious flaws in my explanations, decided to challenge my claims more directly through a demand for specific information that would either validate my statements or expose them as elaborate fiction. "If you truly own multiple commercial properties," she declared with the kind of aggressive certainty that brooked no contradiction, "then you should be able to provide specific details about locations, acquisition costs, and current market values. Anyone can speak in generalities about real estate investment, but actual owners possess detailed knowledge about their holdings." The challenge represented a calculated escalation designed to force either admission of deception or provision of information that could be independently verified. Patricia's confidence in delivering this ultimatum reflected her assumption that I would be unable to provide convincing details about properties that she believed did not actually exist. Margaret nodded enthusiastically in support of Patricia's challenge, recognizing an opportunity to restore the comfortable social dynamics that had been disrupted by my unexpected claims about commercial property ownership. Her relief at Patricia's aggressive response was evident in her expression as she anticipated my inability to provide satisfactory answers to demands for specific information. But Catherine's expression had shifted to something approaching alarm as she recognized the potential consequences of Patricia's confrontational approach. Her more sophisticated understanding of commercial real estate had convinced her that my knowledge was too detailed and specific to represent casual familiarity or deliberate deception, which meant that Patricia was potentially challenging someone whose actual financial resources might exceed their own. The moment stretched between us like a bridge over an abyss, with Patricia's aggressive confidence on one side and my calm certainty on the other. The choice I made in response to her challenge would determine not only the future of our relationship, but also the continuation of the strategic patience that had protected my privacy and provided such valuable intelligence about their thinking and behavior. I reached into my tennis bag and withdrew my phone, accessing the property management application that tracked the performance of my real estate portfolio in real time. The screen displayed current rental income, occupancy rates, maintenance schedules, and market value assessments for 43 commercial properties throughout the metropolitan area, representing a total investment value that exceeded $200 million. The Meridian office complex on 5th Street, I began, selecting one of my larger properties for demonstration purposes. Acquired 18 months ago for $12.4 million, currently generating monthly rental income of $108,000, with occupancy at 96% and projected market value of $14.2 million based on recent comparable sales. Patricia's expression underwent a dramatic transformation as she processed the specific financial details that I was providing with casual precision. The numbers I had quoted exceeded her family's entire net worth, and the matter-of-fact manner in which I discussed multi-million-dollar property transactions suggested a level of financial sophistication that contradicted everything she had assumed about my circumstances. The Westgate Shopping Center required more complex financing, I continued, recognizing that this moment of revelation could not be reversed and that complete honesty would serve my long-term interests better than continued deception. $22 million acquisition cost with seller financing that allowed for 20% down payment and favorable interest rates. Current annual net income of $2.8 million with appreciation potential driven by planned infrastructure improvements in the surrounding area. Margaret had become completely silent, her earlier enthusiasm for challenging my credibility replaced by dawning comprehension of the magnitude of her miscalculation. The financial figures I was discussing represented wealth that exceeded her family's holdings by substantial margins, and the casual manner in which I referenced multi-million-dollar transactions suggested a level of business sophistication that she had never encountered in someone her own age. Catherine's response proved the most telling, as her family's extensive business experience had provided her with the knowledge necessary to evaluate the credibility of what I was describing. Her expression reflected not skepticism but rather the kind of shocked recognition that accompanied the discovery of a fundamental misunderstanding about reality. The Harbor District development represents my most ambitious project, I concluded, accessing the financial projections for a mixed-use development that had required 3 years of planning and coordination with multiple investors and municipal authorities. $48 million total investment with projected annual returns exceeding 15% once fully leased and operational. The silence that followed my revelation carried the weight of completely disrupted assumptions and permanently altered social dynamics. Patricia's aggressive confidence had evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable recognition that she had challenged someone whose financial resources and business expertise exceeded her own by orders of magnitude. Her attempt to expose me as a fraud had instead revealed the limitations of her own understanding about wealth, business, and the relationship between appearance and substance. The tennis match could not continue under these circumstances, as the comfortable assumptions that had enabled our weekly routine had been permanently shattered by information that none of them had been prepared to process. The revelation of my true circumstances would require fundamental adjustments to every aspect of our relationship and their understanding of social hierarchy within the club environment. But more importantly, the moment had arrived when strategic patience would transition to active engagement, and the period of careful observation and intelligence gathering would give way to more direct involvement in the social and business dynamics that shaped their world. The game had changed completely, and the rules they had relied upon to maintain their comfortable positions of authority would no longer provide the security and predictability they had taken for granted. The remainder of our tennis session proceeded in an atmosphere of profound awkwardness that rendered competitive play essentially impossible. Patricia Whitmore's usual commanding presence had diminished considerably following the revelation of my commercial real estate portfolio, and her attempts to maintain normal conversation carried an underlying tension that affected every interaction among our group. The comfortable social dynamics that had sustained our weekly routine for months had been permanently disrupted by information that none of them had anticipated or prepared to process. Margaret Thornfield appeared particularly affected by the dramatic shift in circumstances. Her previous confidence about social hierarchy and financial positioning, having been undermined by the discovery that someone she had dismissed as economically disadvantaged, actually possessed resources that exceeded her family's wealth by substantial margins. Her silence during the final games reflected not mere surprise but rather the kind of fundamental disorientation that accompanied the complete invalidation of core assumptions about reality and social order. Catherine Pembroke demonstrated the most sophisticated response to the changed situation, her family's extensive business experience having provided her with sufficient context to recognize both the significance of what had been revealed and the potential implications for future relationships within the club environment. Her measured comments and careful questions suggested that she was rapidly reassessing not only my actual position within the social hierarchy, but also the strategic advantages that might result from cultivating a more substantial relationship with someone whose business expertise and financial resources had been so dramatically underestimated. The walk from the tennis courts to the clubhouse provided additional opportunities for observation and analysis as each woman processed the implications of the morning's revelations according to her individual personality and social priorities. Patricia's body language revealed the kind of defensive calculation that accompanied threatened authority, while Margaret's nervous energy suggested anxiety about potential social consequences that might result from her previous condescending behavior towards someone whose actual status exceeded her own. The clubhouse dining room occupied the most prestigious location within the facility, featuring panoramic windows that overlooked the 18th hole and provided views of the meticulously maintained grounds that extended toward the city skyline beyond. The interior design reflected the same commitment to traditional elegance that characterized the entire facility, with mahogany paneling, crystal chandeliers, and oil paintings that created an atmosphere of refined exclusivity appropriate for the most influential members of the community. Our usual table had been reserved according to the standing arrangement that Patricia had established months earlier, when she had assumed responsibility for coordinating our weekly social gatherings. The seating positioned her at the head of the table with optimal views of both the golf course and the dining room's social activity, reflecting her preference for maintaining awareness of conversations and interactions that might affect her understanding of club politics and member relationships. The conversation during lunch revealed the extent to which the morning's revelations had disrupted established patterns of communication and social positioning within our group. Patricia's usual tendency to dominate discussions through authoritative commentary about club affairs and community politics had been replaced by more tentative observations that seemed designed to test my reactions and gauge my potential influence within the broader social ecosystem. "Victoria," she began carefully, her tone carrying none of the casual dismissiveness that had characterized previous conversations about my background and circumstances. "I had no idea that your business activities were so extensive. Commercial real estate investment requires such sophisticated market analysis and financial planning. Your grandmother must have provided excellent guidance about wealth management and investment strategy." Her comment represented both an acknowledgement of my demonstrated financial sophistication and an attempt to understand the historical foundation that had enabled such substantial success at a relatively young age. The reference to my grandmother also suggested that Patricia was beginning to reconsider the assumptions she had made about my family background and the resources that might have been available to support my business development activities. "My grandmother taught me that real wealth is built through systematic investment in assets that generate consistent income while appreciating in value over time," I replied, recognizing an opportunity to share the philosophical foundation that had guided my approach to business and wealth accumulation. She believed that the most dangerous mistake wealthy people could make was allowing their lifestyle expenses to exceed their investment income, because temporary comfort could easily become permanent financial vulnerability. Margaret leaned forward with obvious interest, her competitive instincts recognizing the potential value of insights that might improve her own family's investment performance and financial security. Her previous dismissiveness had been replaced by genuine curiosity about strategies and principles that had enabled such impressive results through systematic application rather than inherited advantages or fortunate circumstances. "That's fascinating advice," she responded thoughtfully. "Most financial advisors focus on portfolio diversification and risk management, but your approach seems more focused on income generation and asset control. Have you found that direct property ownership provides better returns than traditional securities investments?" Her question demonstrated a level of financial sophistication that had not been evident during our previous interactions, suggesting that her earlier focus on social positioning and luxury consumption had obscured genuine interest in wealth building and investment strategy. The prospect of learning from someone whose demonstrated success exceeded her family's achievements had apparently motivated a more serious engagement with financial concepts and business principles. Catherine's contribution to the conversation revealed the most strategic thinking about the potential implications of the morning's revelations for our future relationships and social dynamics within the club environment. Her family's extensive business experience had provided her with understanding of how information about financial resources and business expertise could affect power balances and influence patterns among wealthy individuals and organizations. Victoria, your real estate portfolio suggests a level of market knowledge and investment capability that would be valuable for many club members who are looking for alternative investment opportunities, she observed with characteristic directness. Have you considered whether there might be potential for partnership or collaboration on larger development projects that would benefit from additional capital and resources? Quote, her suggestion carried multiple implications that extended beyond simple business proposition into the realm of social positioning and influence development within the club's power structure. By proposing potential collaboration, Catherine was simultaneously acknowledging my demonstrated financial capabilities and positioning herself as someone who could provide access to additional resources and opportunities that might enable even larger and more profitable ventures. The lunch conversation continued for over an hour as each woman adjusted her understanding of social dynamics and potential opportunities based on the dramatically revised assessment of my circumstances and capabilities. Patricia's questions focused primarily on understanding the scope and nature of my business activities, with particular interest in how commercial real estate investment might complement her husband's banking and financial services businesses. Margaret's inquiries centered on investment strategies and wealth-building principles that she might apply to improve her family's financial performance and long-term security. Catherine's approach proved the most sophisticated, as she explored potential synergies between my real estate expertise and her family's extensive business interests in manufacturing, distribution, and international trade. Her questions revealed both genuine respect for my demonstrated abilities and strategic thinking about how collaborative relationships might provide mutual benefits that exceeded what either party could achieve independently. The transformation in their behavior and attitudes represented more than simple adjustment to new information about my financial circumstances. Their responses reflected fundamental recognition that the social hierarchy they had assumed was based on accurate assessment of resources and capabilities had been revealed as incomplete and potentially misleading. The comfortable assumptions that had enabled their casual dismissiveness and condescending behavior had been permanently undermined by evidence that contradicted their understanding of wealth, success, and social positioning. However, the afternoon's developments also revealed the beginning of more complex challenges that would result from the end of my strategic invisibility within the club environment. Patricia's obvious discomfort with the revised power dynamics suggested potential for defensive reactions that might create obstacles for my continued membership and social participation. Her previous confidence in her own superior position had been built upon the assumption that other members possessed fewer resources and less sophisticated business understanding than her own family had achieved. Margaret's enthusiasm for learning about investment strategies carried the risk of excessive attention and scrutiny that might complicate my preference for maintaining privacy about specific business activities and financial details. Her tendency towards social climbing and competitive positioning might motivate attempts to associate herself with my success in ways that could attract unwanted attention from other members, and potentially compromise the discretion that had protected my business activities from outside interference. Catherine's strategic thinking about potential collaboration represented both opportunity and danger, as her family's extensive business connections and political influence could provide access to larger development projects and more sophisticated financing arrangements. However, partnership with established wealthy families also carried risks related to loss of control over business decisions and potential exposure to legal and regulatory scrutiny that might affect my existing operations and future growth plans. The most immediate consequence of the morning's revelations would be the inevitable spread of information about my actual financial circumstances throughout the club membership and the broader social networks that connected Maplewood's members to other wealthy individuals and business leaders throughout the region. The transformation from invisible outsider to recognized member of the financial elite would create new opportunities for business development and social influence, but it would also eliminate the protective anonymity that had enabled my systematic observation and intelligence gathering about market trends and investment opportunities. The evening's reflection period in my home office provided an opportunity to assess the strategic implications of the day's developments. and consider appropriate responses to the changed circumstances that would shape my future interactions within the club environment. The property management software displayed the current performance of my real estate portfolio, with rental income exceeding $200,000 for the month, and property values continuing to appreciate according to the market analysis that guided my acquisition and development strategies. The financial security represented by these assets provided both confidence and perspective about the social challenges that might result from increased visibility and recognition within the club's power structure. My grandmother's guidance about the relationship between wealth and responsibility had emphasized that financial success created obligations to use resources wisely, while maintaining the values and principles that had enabled achievement in the first place. The decision about how to proceed with Patricia, Margaret, and Catherine would require careful consideration of both the opportunities and risks that accompanied their revised understanding of my circumstances and capabilities. Their apparent interest in learning from my investment approach and potentially collaborating on business ventures could provide access to larger projects and more sophisticated financing arrangements that would accelerate the growth of my real estate portfolio and expand my influence within the commercial development community. However, the end of strategic invisibility also meant that future business activities would be subject to greater scrutiny and potential interference from individuals whose own interests might not align with my long-term objectives and values. The comfortable position of observing and learning from the behavior of wealthy individuals while remaining personally unnoticed had been permanently sacrificed in exchange for recognition and potential collaboration that carried both promise and peril. The morning's tennis match had revealed not only my true financial circumstances, but also the limitations of their understanding about wealth building, business strategy, and the relationship between appearance and substance. Their assumptions about social hierarchy and economic positioning had been based on superficial indicators, rather than systematic assessment of actual capabilities and resources, creating opportunities for those who understood the difference between looking wealthy and building wealth to achieve substantial advantages through strategic patience and careful preparation. The challenge moving forward would be to leverage the recognition and respect that accompanied demonstrated success while maintaining the discretion and strategic thinking that had enabled such achievement. The comfortable period of learning and preparation was ending, but the foundation had been established for a new phase of business development and social influence that could benefit not only my own interests, but also those who demonstrated genuine commitment to learning and growth rather than mere association with success. The following Wednesday arrived with an invitation that would have been inconceivable just 1 week earlier. Patricia Whitmore had requested a private meeting to discuss what she termed mutual business interests and potential collaboration opportunities. The formal language of her written request reflected the dramatic transformation in her perception of my status and the careful recalibration of her approach to establishing a productive relationship with someone whose financial resources had proven substantially greater than she had initially assessed. The meeting location she had selected carried significant symbolic importance within the club's social hierarchy. The founder's room occupied the most prestigious space in the clubhouse, reserved exclusively for the most influential members, and typically used for high-level business discussions that required both privacy and an atmosphere that conveyed the gravity of serious financial negotiations. Her choice of this venue represented both acknowledgement of my demonstrated wealth and an attempt to establish the meeting's importance within the broader context of club business and social relationships. Patricia's preparation for our discussion had apparently included comprehensive research into commercial real estate markets and investment strategies, as evidenced by the carefully organized materials she had assembled and the sophisticated questions she had developed about market trends, property valuation methods, and financing structures. Her transformation from casual dismissiveness to serious business engagement demonstrated the remarkable speed with which wealthy individuals could adjust their priorities and approaches when presented with evidence of superior financial performance and expertise. The conversation began with Patricia's acknowledgement that her previous assumptions about my circumstances had been based on incomplete information and superficial assessment of indicators that had proven misleading about actual capabilities and resources. Her apology carried the kind of careful phrasing that wealthy individuals used, when recognizing strategic mistakes that might have compromised potentially valuable business relationships and future opportunities. Victoria, I must admit that I allowed appearance to influence my judgment in ways that prevented me from recognizing the sophistication of your business operations and investment expertise. She stated with the kind of measured directness that characterized serious business communications. Your portfolio demonstrates the kind of strategic thinking and market knowledge that would complement several initiatives that my husband's bank has been developing for high-net-worth clients seeking alternative investment opportunities. Her acknowledgement represented more than simple recognition of error. It constituted a strategic repositioning designed to establish the foundation for collaborative business relationships that could provide mutual benefits through the combination of my real estate expertise with her family's banking and financial services capabilities. The careful construction of her apology revealed both genuine respect for my demonstrated abilities and calculated consideration of potential advantages that might result from productive partnership arrangements. The specific business proposal that Patricia presented reflected sophisticated understanding of commercial real estate financing and the potential for creating investment vehicles that could attract capital from other wealthy individuals seeking higher returns than traditional securities markets had been providing. Her husband's bank had been exploring opportunities to develop private real estate investment funds that would allow their clients to participate in commercial property ownership without the complexity and risk exposure that accompanied direct property management responsibilities. The challenge we have encountered, Patricia explained while reviewing detailed financial projections that her husband's team had prepared, involves identifying real estate professionals with sufficient expertise and proven track records to manage large-scale commercial property acquisitions and development projects. Most established firms either lack the innovation to identify undervalued opportunities or demand management fees that significantly reduce investor returns over time. Her analysis of the commercial real estate services market demonstrated considerable research and understanding of the structural problems that limited returns for passive investors, while creating opportunities for individuals with direct market knowledge and property management capabilities. The partnership structure she was proposing would leverage my expertise and existing portfolio while providing access to substantially larger pools of investment capital that could enable acquisition of major development projects previously beyond my individual financial reach. The financial terms of her proposed collaboration proved even more impressive than the strategic concept itself. The bank would provide access to investment capital exceeding $50 million for initial property acquisitions, with potential expansion to $100 million based on performance results and investor demand for additional participation opportunities. My role would involve identifying undervalued commercial properties, negotiating acquisition terms, and managing development and leasing activities that would generate returns for the investment fund participants. The compensation structure included both management fees for ongoing property operations and performance bonuses based on investment returns that exceeded established benchmarks. The financial projections suggested that successful execution of the proposed strategy could generate annual income exceeding $5 million, while providing opportunities for continued expansion of both the investment fund and my personal real estate portfolio through strategic acquisitions and development projects. However, the most significant aspect of Patricia's proposal involved the revelation of information networks and business relationships that had been invisible to me during the months of careful observation and intelligence gathering at the club. Her family's banking activities had provided access to confidential information about pending business relocations, municipal development plans, and regulatory changes that could affect commercial property values throughout the metropolitan area and surrounding regions. The advantage of our banking relationships, Patricia continued, accessing a secure database on her tablet computer, involves early notification about corporate expansion plans, infrastructure investments, and zoning modifications that create opportunities for strategic property acquisitions before market prices reflect the increased demand that will result from these developments. The information she displayed included details about 3 major corporate relocations that would bring over 2,000 employees to specific neighborhoods within the next 18 months, municipal plans for transportation infrastructure improvements that would enhance property values along The value of this advance intelligence for real estate investment decisions was immeasurable, as property acquisitions made before public announcement of these developments could generate returns of 300% or more over relatively short time periods. The banking industry's position at the center of business financing activities provided access to strategic information that was not available through traditional market research or public records analysis. Patricia's willingness to share such valuable intelligence represented both recognition of my demonstrated expertise and confidence that collaborative arrangements would generate substantially greater profits than independent operations by either party. The combination of her access to advanced market information with my property acquisition and management capabilities could create competitive advantages that would be difficult for other real estate investors to match or duplicate. The discussion extended beyond specific business proposals into broader consideration of how strategic partnerships among club members could create mutual benefits that transcended individual financial interests. Patricia's research had identified several other members whose business activities could complement real estate investment operations through provision of specialized services, political connections, or additional capital resources for larger development projects. Margaret Thornfield's family manufacturing operations, for example, could provide cost advantages for construction and renovation projects through direct relationships with suppliers and contractors who offered preferred pricing for volume commitments. Catherine Pembroke's extensive political and regulatory connections could facilitate approval processes for complex development projects, while ensuring compliance with environmental and zoning requirements that often delayed or prevented competitive developments. The potential for creating an integrated network of business relationships among club members represented opportunities for collaborative advantage that could benefit all participants, while establishing Maplewood Country Club as a center for sophisticated business development and investment coordination. Patricia's vision extended beyond simple real estate investment into the creation of a comprehensive business ecosystem that would leverage the collective resources and expertise of the membership for mutual financial benefit. The strategic implications of such arrangements would extend far beyond immediate profit generation into the development of long-term competitive advantages that would be extremely difficult for outsiders to penetrate or duplicate. The combination of financial resources, market intelligence, political connections, and specialized expertise available within the club membership could create opportunities for business development that would not be accessible through traditional commercial relationships or public market activities. However, the transition from individual operator to collaborative partner would require fundamental adjustments to my business approach and strategic priorities. The privacy and discretion that had characterized my property acquisition and management activities would need to be balanced against the transparency and coordination required for effective partnership operations and investor relations management. The decision about whether to accept Patricia's proposal would determine not only the future scope and direction of my real estate activities, but also my position within the social and business networks that connected Maplewood's membership to broader commercial and political influence throughout the region. The opportunity for accelerated growth and expanded influence carried corresponding risks related to increased scrutiny, regulatory compliance, and dependence on relationships that might prove less reliable than individual control and decision-making authority. The meeting concluded with Patricia's request for comprehensive financial statements and business plans that would enable her husband's bank to complete their due diligence evaluation and finalize the terms of potential partnership arrangements. The level of financial disclosure required would necessarily end the privacy that had protected my business operations from outside interference, while creating opportunities for the kind of growth and expansion that could transform regional commercial real estate markets. The walk back to my vehicle provided time for reflection about the remarkable transformation that had occurred within 1 week of revealing my actual financial circumstances and business expertise. The journey from dismissed outsider to sought-after partner demonstrated both the speed with which wealthy individuals could recognize and respond to demonstrated capability and the profound importance of substance over appearance in establishing lasting business relationships and social influence. The evening's analysis of Patricia's proposal revealed both the tremendous opportunities and significant challenges that would accompany acceptance of her collaboration terms. The access to substantial additional capital and advanced market intelligence could accelerate the growth of my real estate portfolio while establishing my position as a major influence within the regional commercial development community. The financial projections suggested potential for achieving net worth exceeding $500 million within 5 years, through strategic leverage of the proposed partnership resources and capabilities. However, the transformation from independent operator to institutional partner would require abandoning the flexibility and privacy that had enabled my systematic market analysis and opportunistic acquisition strategies. The reporting requirements and fiduciary responsibilities associated with managing other people's investment capital would create constraints on business decisions while exposing operations to regulatory oversight and potential legal complications that individual property ownership had avoided. The decision would ultimately depend on whether the benefits of accelerated growth and expanded influence justified the costs of increased complexity and reduced autonomy in business operations. My grandmother's guidance about the relationship between wealth and responsibility suggested that the opportunity to help other investors achieve superior returns while advancing broader economic development goals represented the kind of positive impact that justified accepting additional obligations and constraints. The foundation had been established for a new phase of business development that could benefit not only my personal financial interests, but also the broader community through job creation, infrastructure improvement, and economic development that would enhance property values and business opportunities throughout the metropolitan area. The question was whether I possessed the courage and wisdom to embrace the responsibilities that accompanied such opportunities, while maintaining the principles and values that had enabled success in the first place. The subsequent 10 days provided essential time for comprehensive analysis of Patricia Whitmore's partnership proposal while conducting independent research into the banking relationships, market intelligence networks, and regulatory connections that would form the foundation of any collaborative arrangement. The decision required evaluation not merely of immediate financial benefits but also of long-term strategic implications for business independence, operational flexibility, and alignment with the wealth-building principles that my grandmother had established as fundamental to sustainable success. The financial due diligence process revealed the sophisticated infrastructure that supported the Whitmore family's banking operations and their extensive relationships within the commercial real estate financing sector. Their institution held loan portfolios exceeding $2 billion across diverse property types and geographic markets, with particular expertise in large-scale commercial developments that required complex financing structures and multi-party coordination. The bank's position within regional financial networks provided access to investment capital and market intelligence that would significantly enhance the scope and profitability of strategic property acquisitions. However, the investigation also uncovered information about the regulatory environment and compliance requirements that would govern institutional real estate investment activities. The oversight responsibilities associated with managing investment funds that included third-party capital would necessitate quarterly reporting, annual audits, and ongoing disclosure of business operations that would eliminate the privacy and discretion that had characterized my individual property ownership and management approach. The evaluation process included confidential consultations with 3 independent commercial real estate attorneys who specialized in partnership structures and investment fund development. Their analysis confirmed both the substantial opportunities and significant obligations that would accompany acceptance of institutional partnership arrangements. The potential for accelerated portfolio growth and expanded market influence would require corresponding acceptance of fiduciary responsibilities and regulatory constraints that would fundamentally alter the operational framework within which business decisions were made and implemented. The legal review also identified alternative partnership structures that could provide access to additional capital and market intelligence while preserving greater autonomy over acquisition decisions and property management strategies. Limited liability partnerships and joint venture arrangements could enable collaborative projects without the comprehensive integration and oversight requirements associated with formal investment fund management. These alternatives would allow selective participation in larger development opportunities while maintaining independent control over existing assets and future acquisition priorities. The strategic planning process extended beyond financial considerations to encompass broader evaluation of relationship dynamics and long-term compatibility with potential partners. Patricia Whitmore's transformation from dismissive skeptic to enthusiastic collaborator demonstrated both the speed with which elite individuals could recognize and respond to demonstrated capability and the potentially volatile nature of relationships that were based primarily on mutual financial benefit rather than shared values and compatible operational philosophies. Margaret Thornfield's manufacturing connections presented additional opportunities for operational cost reduction and supply chain optimization that could enhance project profitability while providing her family with consistent revenue streams from construction and renovation activities. Her enthusiasm for learning investment strategies suggested genuine interest in wealth-building principles that transcended mere association with successful individuals. The potential for mentoring relationships that could benefit both parties, while advancing broader economic development goals, represented the kind of positive impact that justified expanded collaboration and resource sharing. Catherine Pembroke's political and regulatory connections offered perhaps the most valuable strategic advantages for large-scale commercial development projects. Her family's historical involvement in municipal planning and infrastructure development had created relationships with key decision-makers who influenced zoning policies, permit approval processes, and public investment priorities that could significantly affect commercial property values and development opportunities. The ability to navigate complex regulatory environments while ensuring compliance with evolving environmental and social responsibility standards would prove essential for major development projects that could generate substantial returns while contributing to community improvement and economic growth. The synthesis of these individual capabilities and resources suggested opportunities for creating an integrated business network that could identify, acquire, develop, and manage commercial properties more effectively than any individual operator could achieve independently. The combination of financial resources, market intelligence, construction capabilities, and regulatory expertise could enable development projects that would transform entire neighborhoods while generating superior returns for all participants in the collaborative arrangement. The strategic planning process also revealed the importance of establishing clear governance structures and decision-making protocols that would prevent conflicts and ensure efficient coordination among partners with different priorities and operational preferences. The development of comprehensive partnership agreements would require detailed specification of roles, responsibilities, profit-sharing arrangements, and dispute resolution mechanisms that would protect individual interests while enabling effective collaboration on complex projects that required sustained coordination and mutual accountability. The preparation of detailed business plans for potential collaborative arrangements necessitated unprecedented disclosure of financial information and strategic priorities that had remained confidential throughout the 8-year development of my real estate portfolio. The compilation of comprehensive asset valuations, income statements, and growth projections created documentation that would be essential for partnership negotiations, while exposing operational details and strategic advantages that had previously provided competitive protection through information asymmetry. The business planning process included development of multiple scenarios that reflected different levels of collaboration and resource integration. Conservative approaches would limit partnership activities to specific projects while maintaining independent control over existing assets and acquisition strategies. Moderate integration would create formal joint venture structures for larger development opportunities, while preserving individual decision-making authority for smaller acquisitions and routine property management activities. Comprehensive partnership arrangements would integrate operations across all business activities, while maximizing access to capital and market intelligence through full institutional collaboration. The financial modeling for each scenario revealed dramatically different growth trajectories and risk profiles that would determine the optimal approach based on personal priorities and market conditions. Conservative collaboration could double portfolio value within 5 years, while preserving operational independence and minimizing regulatory exposure. Moderate integration could achieve portfolio growth of 400% over the same period, while requiring acceptance of partnership obligations and shared decision-making responsibilities. Comprehensive collaboration could enable portfolio expansion exceeding $1 billion within 7 years, but would necessitate fundamental transformation from independent operator to institutional manager, with corresponding fiduciary obligations and regulatory oversight requirements. The decision framework that emerged from this analysis emphasized the importance of maintaining alignment between business growth objectives and personal values, while ensuring that expanded influence and resources contributed to positive economic and social development outcomes. My grandmother's guidance about the relationship between wealth and responsibility suggested that opportunities for significant impact carried corresponding obligations to consider broader community benefits, rather than focusing exclusively on individual financial gain. The alliance-building process began with individual meetings designed to explore compatibility and establish mutual understanding about strategic priorities, operational preferences, and ethical standards that would govern collaborative business relationships. These discussions revealed important differences in approach and philosophy that would require careful consideration before committing to formal partnership arrangements that could affect business operations for years or decades. Patricia Whitmore's primary motivation appeared to center on demonstrating superior investment performance that would enhance her husband's banking reputation, while generating personal financial returns that exceeded what their existing portfolio had achieved through traditional investment strategies. Her approach to business relationships reflected the competitive dynamics that characterized elite social environments, with emphasis on measurable outcomes and comparative advantage over alternative investment opportunities and competing institutions. Margaret Thornfield's interests focused more directly on learning wealth-building strategies that could improve her family's long-term financial security, while providing opportunities for active involvement in business operations that would utilize her manufacturing expertise and construction industry connections. Her enthusiasm for hands-on participation in project development suggested compatibility with operational approaches that emphasized direct involvement and personal accountability, rather than passive investment management through professional intermediaries. Catherine Pembroke's perspective reflected the longest-term thinking and broadest consideration of community impact and social responsibility that would accompany large-scale development projects. Her family's historical involvement in municipal development had created awareness of the complex relationships between private investment and public benefit that would require careful attention to environmental sustainability, community engagement, and economic development outcomes that extended beyond immediate profit generation for project participants. The compatibility assessment revealed both significant opportunities for productive collaboration and important challenges that would require ongoing attention and careful management throughout the development of formal partnership arrangements. The differences in motivation, operational philosophy, and strategic priorities could create tensions that might undermine project effectiveness, while generating conflicts that could damage both business relationships and individual reputations within the club environment and broader commercial community. However, the complementary nature of their respective capabilities and resources suggested that effective coordination could produce results that exceeded what any individual participant could achieve independently. The combination of financial resources, market intelligence, operational expertise, and regulatory connections could enable development projects that would establish new standards for commercial real estate investment while generating superior returns and positive community impact that would enhance the reputation and influence of all participants. The alliance-building process also included evaluation of additional club members whose capabilities and resources could contribute to expanded business networks and collaborative opportunities. The systematic assessment of member backgrounds, business interests, and potential synergies revealed numerous possibilities for creating integrated business relationships that would leverage the collective resources and expertise available within the Maplewood Country Club membership for mutual benefit and competitive advantage. The identification of complementary capabilities included legal expertise for complex transaction structures, architectural and engineering services for innovative development approaches, technology capabilities for property management optimization, and international business connections for potential expansion into global real estate markets. The comprehensive mapping of available resources and expertise within the club membership revealed opportunities for creating business ecosystems that would be extremely difficult for outside competitors to penetrate or duplicate. The strategic planning phase concluded with the development of detailed implementation timelines and milestone frameworks that would guide the establishment of formal partnership arrangements, while preserving flexibility to adjust approaches based on market conditions and operational experience. The phased implementation strategy would begin with limited collaboration on specific projects, while gradually expanding integration and resource sharing based on performance results and relationship development outcomes. The foundation had been established for a new phase of business development that could transform not only individual financial circumstances, but also the broader commercial real estate market, through innovative approaches to project development, financing, and community engagement. The decision would determine whether the next chapter would emphasize continued independent growth or expanded collaborative influence that could benefit multiple stakeholders while advancing broader economic development and community improvement objectives. The implementation of the strategic alliance began with the formation of Sterling Capital Partners, a limited liability partnership that would serve as the investment vehicle for collaborative real estate acquisition and development projects. The partnership structure had been carefully designed to preserve individual decision-making authority for existing assets while enabling coordinated investment in larger opportunities that required combined financial resources and specialized expertise from multiple participants. The initial capitalization of Sterling Capital Partners totaled $75 million, with contributions reflecting both the financial capacity and strategic interests of each founding partner. My contribution included $25 million in cash equivalents generated through strategic refinancing of existing properties, along with commitment of acquisition expertise and property management capabilities that would guide investment decisions and operational oversight. Patricia Whitmore's banking relationships provided $30 million in institutional investment capital, while her husband's bank would serve as the primary financing source for leveraged acquisitions that could maximize returns through optimal capital structure design. Margaret Thornfield contributed $15 million, along with guaranteed access to construction and renovation services at preferential rates that would reduce project costs, while ensuring quality control and timeline adherence for development activities. Catherine Pembroke's investment of $15 million included extensive regulatory and political connections that would facilitate permit approval processes and municipal coordination for complex development projects that required public sector engagement and community stakeholder management. The partnership agreement established governance structures that balanced collaborative decision-making with efficient execution capabilities. Major acquisition decisions required unanimous consent from all partners, ensuring that each investment reflected shared confidence in market analysis and strategic positioning. However, operational management responsibilities were delegated according to individual expertise and interest, with my oversight of property acquisition and management activities, Patricia's coordination of financing arrangements, Margaret's supervision of construction and renovation projects, and Catherine's management of regulatory compliance and community relations. The first strategic opportunity emerged within 3 weeks of partnership formation through Patricia's banking intelligence network. A major pharmaceutical corporation had initiated confidential site selection processes for a new research and development facility that would employ over 800 highly compensated professionals in specialized laboratory and office environments. The site requirements included proximity to university research institutions, access to transportation infrastructure, and availability of large contiguous parcels suitable for campus-style development with significant expansion potential. The advance notification provided by banking relationships enabled Sterling Capital Partners to identify and evaluate potential sites before public announcement of the corporate expansion would affect property values and acquisition costs. The target area encompassed several underutilized commercial properties in an established business district that possessed the infrastructure and proximity characteristics required for pharmaceutical research operations, while offering substantial development potential through strategic assembly and redevelopment of adjacent parcels. The acquisition strategy involved simultaneous purchase of 3 contiguous properties totaling 47 acres with existing buildings that could provide immediate occupancy for initial operations, while longer-term development proceeded according to corporate expansion requirements. The combined acquisition cost of $18 million represented significant discount to market value due to seller circumstances and the complexity of coordinating multiple property transfers within compressed timeframes that pharmaceutical site selection demanded. The financing structure demonstrated the operational advantages of partnership collaboration compared to individual acquisition approaches. Patricia's banking relationships enabled acquisition financing at preferential rates, with flexible terms that accommodated the uncertainty inherent in corporate site selection processes. The loan structure included provisions for construction financing that would support development activities if the pharmaceutical opportunity materialized, while maintaining option value for alternative development approaches if corporate requirements changed or competitive factors affected site selection outcomes. Margaret's construction industry connections proved invaluable during the due diligence process, providing rapid assessment of existing building conditions and renovation requirements that would be necessary to meet pharmaceutical laboratory and office standards. Her relationships with specialized contractors enabled accurate cost estimation for complex mechanical and electrical systems that would be required for research facility operations, ensuring that development budgets reflected realistic implementation costs rather than preliminary estimates that might prove inadequate during actual construction phases. Catherine's regulatory expertise streamlined the environmental assessment and permit application processes that could have delayed acquisition timelines and compromised competitive positioning relative to other potential development sites. Her relationships with municipal planning departments enabled accelerated review of zoning compliance and development potential that provided confidence about long-term expansion possibilities, while identifying potential regulatory constraints that could affect project feasibility or profitability. The coordinated approach enabled completion of acquisition negotiations within 6 weeks of initial site identification, providing Sterling Capital Partners with controlling interest in strategically positioned properties before competing investors recognized the development opportunity or understood the pharmaceutical expansion plans that would drive future demand for research facility space in the target market area. The second strategic initiative involved implementation of systematic market intelligence gathering that would identify future opportunities before they became visible to traditional real estate investment approaches. The partnership established formal information sharing protocols that leveraged the diverse business networks and industry relationships available through individual partner connections, while maintaining confidentiality standards that protected competitive advantages and relationship integrity. Patricia's banking relationships provided advance notification of business expansion plans, corporate relocations, and financing activities that would affect commercial real estate demand across diverse industry sectors and geographic markets. The intelligence network included relationships with corporate development departments, commercial lending teams, and investment banking groups that facilitated early identification of real estate requirements before formal site selection processes began or public announcements affected market conditions. Margaret's manufacturing industry connections revealed supply chain optimization trends and production facility development plans that would create demand for industrial real estate and supporting commercial services in specific geographic areas. Her relationships with logistics providers, equipment suppliers, and workforce development organizations provided insights into infrastructure requirements and location preferences that would guide industrial property investment decisions and development planning activities. Catherine's political and regulatory networks offered unique perspective on municipal development priorities, infrastructure investment plans, and zoning policy modifications that would affect commercial property values and development opportunities across extended timeframes. Her involvement in civic organizations and economic development initiatives provided access to confidential planning discussions and policy development processes that would shape business climate and investment attractiveness for particular markets and property types. The integration of these intelligence sources created comprehensive market awareness that enabled proactive investment positioning rather than reactive response to opportunities that had already attracted competitive attention and market pricing pressure. The systematic approach to information gathering and analysis provided sustainable competitive advantages that would support consistent identification of undervalued properties and emerging development opportunities across diverse market conditions and investment cycles. The third strategic move involved establishing operational systems that would support efficient management of expanded property portfolios while maintaining the quality standards and tenant relationships that generated consistent rental income and property value appreciation. The partnership implementation required integration of individual property management approaches with standardized procedures that could accommodate diverse property types and market conditions, while preserving the flexibility necessary for opportunistic investment and development activities. The property management technology platform combined existing systems that had proven effective for individual operations with enhanced capabilities that could support collaborative oversight and reporting requirements for partnership activities. The integrated system provided real-time monitoring of rental income, occupancy rates, maintenance costs, and capital improvement projects across all properties within the partnership portfolio, while maintaining separate tracking for individual assets that remained outside the collaborative investment structure. The tenant relationship management approach emphasized consistent service delivery and proactive communication that would support lease renewal retention and rental rate optimization across economic cycles and market conditions. The systematic approach to tenant satisfaction measurement and service quality improvement created competitive advantages in markets where alternative commercial space providers emphasized cost minimization rather than value creation for business tenants who required reliable infrastructure and responsive property management support. The operational efficiency initiatives included implementation of energy management systems that reduced utility costs while enhancing environmental sustainability performance for tenants who increasingly prioritized corporate social responsibility factors in location decisions. The technology improvements generated immediate cost savings, while positioning partnership properties as preferred alternatives for environmentally conscious businesses that required demonstration of sustainable operations for regulatory compliance or corporate reputation management. The initial performance results exceeded projections across all strategic initiatives within the first 6 months of partnership operations. The pharmaceutical site acquisition generated immediate property value appreciation of $12 million following public announcement of the corporate expansion decision, while projected rental income from long-term lease arrangements would provide annual returns exceeding 18% on invested capital. The superior performance reflected both the value of advanced market intelligence and the operational advantages created through coordinated acquisition and development capabilities. The systematic market intelligence gathering identified 14 additional investment opportunities during the initial implementation period, with 3 acquisitions completed and 5 others proceeding through due diligence and negotiation phases. The consistent identification of undervalued properties and emerging development opportunities demonstrated the sustainability of competitive advantages created through comprehensive information networks and collaborative analytical capabilities. The operational system implementations generated measurable improvements in portfolio performance across multiple metrics, including tenant retention rates, rental income growth, and property value appreciation. The enhanced management capabilities enabled optimization of existing assets while supporting effective integration of new acquisitions into standardized operational frameworks that preserved individual property characteristics while achieving economies of scale for common service functions. The success of initial strategic initiatives validated the partnership approach while demonstrating the amplified capabilities that resulted from systematic collaboration among individuals with complementary expertise and resources. The combination of financial capital, market intelligence, operational capabilities, and regulatory connections created competitive advantages that would be extremely difficult for individual investors to achieve independently or for outside competitors to penetrate without similar access to diverse networks and specialized knowledge. The partnership structure had proven capable of identifying, evaluating, and executing complex investment opportunities more effectively than traditional real estate investment approaches, while generating superior returns that benefited all participants according to their contributions and involvement levels. The systematic approach to market analysis, acquisition strategy, and operational management provided sustainable foundations for continued growth and expanded influence within regional commercial real estate markets. The initial victories established credibility and momentum that would support more ambitious development projects, while demonstrating the strategic value of collaboration among elite individuals who possessed complementary capabilities and shared commitment to excellence in execution and performance measurement. The success created opportunities for expanded partnerships and increased influence within broader business and political networks that could facilitate even larger development opportunities and community impact initiatives. The foundation had been established for a new phase of business development that would leverage proven capabilities and successful performance to attract additional capital and partnership opportunities, while maintaining the operational excellence and strategic discipline that had enabled initial achievements. The momentum created through systematic execution of strategic initiatives would support continued expansion and enhanced market influence that could benefit all participants while contributing to broader economic development and community improvement objectives. The success of Sterling Capital Partners had not proceeded unnoticed within the broader commercial real estate community, and the exceptional returns generated through strategic market positioning and collaborative investment approaches had begun attracting attention from established industry participants who viewed emerging competition with considerable concern. The pharmaceutical site acquisition had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded conventional real estate investment strategies, while the systematic identification of undervalued opportunities suggested access to market intelligence and analytical resources that threatened the competitive advantages of traditional investment firms. The counterattack materialized through channels that reflected both the sophistication and the influence of competitors who possessed substantial resources and established relationships within financial and regulatory networks. The initial challenge emerged from Blackstone Development Corporation, a regional real estate investment firm that had dominated commercial property markets for over 2 decades. Through aggressive acquisition strategies and extensive political connections that facilitated favorable regulatory treatment and preferential access to large-scale development opportunities. Blackstone's response to the emerging competitive threat began with systematic investigation of Sterling Capital Partners, financing arrangements, and regulatory compliance status. The firm's legal department initiated comprehensive review of partnership structure documentation, banking relationships, and municipal permit applications that might reveal vulnerabilities or procedural irregularities that could provide grounds for legal challenges or regulatory intervention that would disrupt operations and undermine investor confidence. The investigation revealed the particular attention that Blackstone directed toward the rapid approval processes that had enabled Sterling Capital Partners to complete acquisitions and development approvals with unprecedented efficiency. The firm's established relationships with regulatory agencies and municipal planning departments had historically provided competitive advantages through preferential treatment and insider information about policy development and enforcement priorities. The emergence of another organization that demonstrated superior regulatory navigation capabilities represented a direct threat to systemic advantages that Blackstone had cultivated and protected for decades. The legal challenge that resulted from this investigation focused on alleged irregularities in the environmental assessment procedures that had enabled accelerated approval for the pharmaceutical site development project. Blackstone's environmental law specialists identified technical procedural requirements that they claimed had been inadequately addressed during the permit application process, potentially invalidating development approvals and requiring comprehensive reassessment that could delay project implementation for months or years, while generating substantial additional costs for compliance and legal defense activities. The environmental challenge represented more than simple competitive harassment, as it demonstrated sophisticated understanding of regulatory frameworks and procedural requirements that could affect not only the specific pharmaceutical project, but also future development activities that would require similar permit approvals and environmental compliance documentation. The legal action established precedents and created uncertainties that could complicate future project development, while generating ongoing legal expenses that would reduce investment returns and partnership profitability. The second component of Blackstone's counterattack involved systematic interference with financing relationships and capital market access that had enabled Sterling Capital Partners to pursue strategic acquisitions with optimal leverage and flexible terms. The firm's established relationships within the regional banking community included both formal business partnerships and informal influence networks that could affect lending decisions and credit availability for competing organizations that threatened established market positions. Blackstone's banking relationships enabled the dissemination of confidential information about Sterling Capital Partners, financial structure and investment activities to other financial institutions that might otherwise have provided alternative financing sources for competitive acquisition opportunities. The strategic sharing of market intelligence and competitive analysis created informal coordination among lending institutions that effectively limited access to optimal financing terms while increasing due diligence requirements and approval timelines that could prevent participation in time-sensitive acquisition opportunities. The financing pressure intensified through coordinated efforts to question the sustainability and risk profile of Sterling Capital Partners, investment strategy during formal banking review processes, and informal industry discussions. Blackstone senior executives leveraged their extensive relationships within commercial real estate financing networks to raise concerns about the rapid expansion and aggressive acquisition approach that characterized Sterling Capital Partners' early operations, suggesting that exceptional performance reflected unsustainable risk-taking rather than superior analytical capabilities and operational efficiency. The most sophisticated aspect of Blackstone's counterattack involved strategic market manipulation, designed to undermine the competitive advantages that had enabled Sterling Capital Partners to identify and acquire undervalued properties before competing investors recognized emerging opportunities. The firm's extensive industry relationships provided access to corporate expansion plans and development opportunities that Blackstone could influence through direct engagement with business decision-makers and site selection consultants who determined location requirements and evaluation criteria. Blackstone's corporate relationships enabled proactive contact with companies that were considering expansion or relocation activities, offering comprehensive development services and preferential pricing arrangements that would prevent competitive participation in site selection processes. The firm's established track record and extensive political connections provided credibility and reliability guarantees that smaller organizations could not match, while their financial resources enabled speculative property acquisitions that eliminated opportunities for competing investors to participate in potentially profitable development projects. The market manipulation extended to systematic acquisition of properties in target areas where Sterling Capital Partners had demonstrated interest or investment activity. Blackstone's superior financial resources enabled aggressive bidding that exceeded rational valuation parameters for individual properties, while achieving strategic objectives of limiting competitive access to promising development opportunities and establishing market presence that would deter future competitive activity in designated geographic areas. The coordination among established industry participants created informal market segmentation that reserved the most attractive development opportunities for traditional firms, while relegating newer competitors to secondary markets and smaller projects that offered limited growth potential and reduced profitability. The systematic exclusion reflected both the defensive instincts of established organizations and the collaborative mechanisms that enabled industry coordination without formal conspiracy or antitrust violations. The impact of these coordinated competitive responses became evident through increased difficulty in identifying and acquiring strategic properties, elevated financing costs and extended approval timelines, and reduced access to corporate expansion opportunities that had previously provided substantial returns through advanced positioning and preferred developer relationships. The systematic pressure created operational challenges that required enhanced analytical capabilities and strategic flexibility to maintain competitive performance, while defending against established competitors with superior resources and market influence. The counterattack also included personal and professional attacks designed to undermine credibility and reputation within business and social networks that could affect future partnership opportunities and industry relationships. Blackstone's principals leveraged their established positions within elite social and professional organizations to question the legitimacy and sustainability of Sterling Capital Partners' rapid success, while suggesting that exceptional performance reflected questionable practices rather than superior capabilities and strategic positioning. The reputation management challenge proved particularly complex within the Maplewood Country Club environment, where business and social relationships overlapped in ways that made professional conflicts difficult to separate from personal associations and community standing. The established members who had historical relationships with Blackstone's leadership possessed different perspectives about competitive dynamics and appropriate responses to emerging business challenges than newer members who lacked comparable context and industry experience. The social pressure intensified through systematic efforts to exclude Sterling Capital Partners' principals from exclusive business and social events where important industry relationships were maintained and strategic information was exchanged. The informal coordination among established elite networks created barriers to participation in decision-making processes and relationship development activities that could affect long-term business prospects and community influence within regional commercial and political circles. The most serious threat emerged through regulatory investigation initiated by state agencies that oversee commercial real estate development and environmental compliance activities. Blackstone's political connections enabled initiation of formal inquiry into Sterling Capital Partners' rapid growth and exceptional performance, with particular attention to financing arrangements and regulatory compliance procedures that might indicate improper advantages or procedural violations that would justify sanctions or operational restrictions. The regulatory investigation required comprehensive documentation and legal representation that generated substantial costs while creating uncertainty about future operations and development activities. The formal inquiry process established public records that could affect reputation and credibility within business and financial communities, while providing competitors with detailed information about operational strategies and competitive advantages that had previously remained confidential and protected. The investigation also created precedent for continued regulatory oversight and enhanced compliance requirements that would increase operational costs and procedural complexity for future development activities. The systematic scrutiny represented long-term competitive disadvantage that could persist beyond resolution of specific allegations, while deterring potential investors and partners who preferred to avoid association with organizations subject to regulatory investigation and enforcement activity. The comprehensive nature of Blackstone's counterattack demonstrated both the resources and the strategic sophistication that established industry participants could deploy against emerging competitors who threatened their market position and competitive advantages. The coordinated response across legal, financial, regulatory, and social dimensions required systematic defense strategies that could address multiple challenges simultaneously while maintaining operational effectiveness and continued growth trajectories. The intensity of the competitive response also validated the significance of Sterling Capital Partners' achievements and the legitimacy of the threat that innovative approaches and collaborative capabilities represented to traditional industry structures and established market relationships. The willingness of dominant competitors to invest substantial resources in defensive activities indicated both the effectiveness of emerging competitive strategies and the vulnerability of established advantages to systematic challenge from organizations with superior analytical capabilities and strategic flexibility. The counterattack established the foundation for a more complex competitive environment that would require enhanced strategic thinking and operational excellence to maintain market position while continuing to pursue growth opportunities and expanded influence within regional commercial real estate markets. The challenge would test not only the business capabilities and strategic resources of Sterling Capital Partners, but also the commitment and resilience of partnership participants who faced coordinated pressure designed to undermine confidence and discourage continued competitive activity. The response to these challenges would determine whether Sterling Capital Partners could establish sustainable market position and continued growth despite systematic opposition from established competitors with superior resources and extensive industry relationships. The outcome would establish precedent for innovative approaches to commercial real estate investment while determining the viability of collaborative strategies that challenge traditional market structures and competitive dynamics. The convergence of multiple pressure points reached a critical threshold during the fourth quarter of Sterling Capital Partners' inaugural year, when the systematic campaign orchestrated by Blackstone Development Corporation achieved its intended effect of creating operational paralysis and financial uncertainty that threatened the partnership's fundamental viability. The environmental legal challenge had expanded beyond the pharmaceutical site development to encompass broader questions about due diligence procedures and regulatory compliance across multiple properties, while banking relationships that had provided crucial financing flexibility were systematically undermined through industry coordination and informal pressure campaigns. The regulatory investigation initiated by state oversight agencies had evolved from preliminary inquiry into formal examination that required comprehensive documentation of all business activities, partnership arrangements, and financial transactions since Sterling Capital Partners' formation. The investigation demanded extensive legal representation and compliance documentation that consumed operational resources while creating public uncertainty about the organization's legitimacy and long-term prospects. The formal nature of the proceedings generated public records that provided competitors with detailed intelligence about strategic approaches and competitive advantages, while establishing precedent for continued regulatory oversight that would constrain future operations. The most devastating development emerged through the systematic withdrawal of institutional investors who had committed capital to Sterling Capital Partners based on projected returns and demonstrated early performance. The coordinated pressure campaign had successfully created sufficient uncertainty and reputational concern among conservative institutional investors that they exercised contractual provisions to withdraw committed capital during the partnership's most vulnerable operational period. The capital withdrawals occurred precisely when regulatory compliance costs and legal defense expenses were creating maximum financial pressure on partnership resources. Patricia Whitmore's banking relationships, which had provided the foundation for Sterling Capital Partners' initial success, became a source of additional vulnerability when her husband's institution faced regulatory scrutiny regarding preferential lending arrangements and potential conflicts of interest in real estate financing activities. The investigation into banking practices created pressure for the institution to demonstrate independence and appropriate risk management by terminating relationships that might appear to provide unfair competitive advantages or inadequate oversight of borrower activities. The loss of preferred financing terms and accelerated loan review requirements effectively eliminated the capital structure advantages that had enabled strategic acquisitions and optimal leverage utilization. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.